this game. You gotta have that dog. Desire. That hunger. That non-stop will to win.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's get going, huh? Let's go, gather up. Come on now. All right, fellas, you gotta remember your body is like day-old rice. If it ain't warmed up properly, something real bad can happen. Yep.
Athletes, take your bar. Get set. It's time for the Addict II Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blue Robinson here. I want to thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Really appreciate you doing so. As always, jump on that website, addicttoathlete.org. You'll find all of our backlog podcast information about the team. Man, how to start a chapter of Addict to Athlete in your community by becoming one of our certified recovery coaches, and so much more. There's so much going on that website. And I want to also introduce you to a new platform. We have connected with the School app, SKOOL, and you can find a link in the show notes, and that'll take you to all of our online content. We've got the Addict to Athlete Recovery Playbook. We have stuff from my private therapy practice on there, and it's all free for you to download, to use, to learn, to grow, and to get some dialogue going no matter where you are in the world. You'll be able to jump on there and have some good experiences, because I think it's one of the best ways you can become part of the Addict to Athlete team. So jump on there. Everything's in the show notes below. Go check them out after the podcast. Hey, and while you're there, would you mind just jumping on and giving us a review? Those stars that you guys plug in there, it helps get this podcast out pushed a little further. Doesn't matter what you write in the description. You can tell us what your favorite sports team is. You can tell us what your favorite, dessert might be. Doesn't matter. Those are the stars that count. So if you don't mind going there, throwing some stars down for us, we'd really appreciate it. Well, athletes, today I've got a great thought that I want to get out and give to you, and one that I've been thinking about doing for a while, simply because it becomes so prevalent right now in my private practice, and I've noticed that it has deep connections with sports psychology, and it's really about those butterflies that we get whenever we're doing something new, or maybe even when we're uncertain, and that's the old classic anxiety. I want to dive into some of these principles and concepts occasionally so that we can get back to some of the teaching moments. We have got some great guests in the pipeline to come down and do some good inspirational stuff. But now and then I love to get behind the mic and teach you guys a little bit about maybe things you might be going through. And today I want to talk about how you're not really your anxiety. And a new way to see yourself before anything else begins is to maybe take a little bit of a stewardship check to find out where you're at right now. I think some mornings you don't even make it out of bed before your anxiety starts talking, right? Your eyes open and your mind is already scanning for danger, warning signs. All that anxiety is connected right there in that frontal lobe, and it tries to keep you safe. Your heart might beat a little faster, your stomach might tighten, and before you've even taken your first conscious breath of the day, you can feel like your entire body's bracing for impact, bracing for the day. And I don't think you choose this. I don't think we ever just decide to wake up anxious. But for some of us out there, it seems to be this constant companion. And it just hits you uninvited, like someone pushed play on a movie and there you go, right? It's just happening. And before the day even begins, a quiet thought might slip into your mind a little bit about, why am I like this? What is going on? It's so frustrating. It's confusing. And sometimes I feel like I'm broken. But athletes, I'm here to tell you, you're not broken. You're just overwhelmed, right? And one of the first steps, I believe, in calming anxiety is to understand this simple but very powerful truth, and that is you and your anxiety are not the same thing. When your anxiety has been part of your life for as long as you've been kind of stuck to this little ball of mud called Earth, it becomes kind of woven into a lot of your sense of self. I think you begin to, say things like, I'm just an anxious person, or this is just how I am, or my brain doesn't work like everybody else's. I can't handle things the way that other people do. I can't, slowly change this because it feels like it's always there, kind of keeping me on guard. And that's kind of what it feels like, it's just always there with you. And slowly, without even noticing, I think you start defining yourself by the fear, the worry, the concern, and kind of base life by the tension that you feel. And you're not doing this on purpose, you guys. It happens because anxiety is super loud. and it's persistent and it's repetitive and it demands attention. And over time, you kind of start to mistake its voice, that inner voice of anxiety, for your own. It kind of convinces you of such. But there is a part of you underneath the noise and the anxiety that it just doesn't touch. That anxiety doesn't touch. It's a calmer, more grounded, more capable part of you. And that part is still there even on your worst days where anxiety seems to just be pouring out all over you. And to find that part, I want to borrow some wisdom from some people that I've read about in the past and who've kind of understood the difference between, yourself and your mind and the reactions. And they, I think, probably describe it better than I ever could. And these are coming from the ancients, right? Epictetus, who learned inner freedom from, life despite having no control over his external life. And Carl Rogers, which I love as a theorist, who talked about unconditional positive regard. Carl Rogers was a theorist who believed that your true self remains intact underneath and beneath all that fear and anxiety. And of course, another guy that I truly enjoy learning about, his name was Carl Jung, and he saw anxiety as a messenger and not as an identity. And so Epictetus was born pretty poverty stricken, right? This guy back in the philosophy type days, he wasn't born in comfort. He wasn't even born free. He spent nearly half of his life enslaved in ancient Rome. And someone else decided what he ate, where he slept, what time he woke up, what kind of work he did, how long he worked. All that stuff was being kind of dictated and pushed onto him by other people. I mean, he spent nearly like half of his life doing what everybody else wanted. And his entire life, the external part of that life was controlled by others, which is kind of crazy. Everything was dictated by somebody else. And instead of collapsing under his circumstances, he discovered something really extraordinary. And he figured out that your inner world belongs to you, even when your outer world doesn't. Think about that for a sec, you guys. Epictetus, he discovered something so amazing and something so like captivating. Your inner world belongs to you, even when your outer world doesn't. See, he realized that thoughts and fears and impulses are not you. They're experiences that rise within you. You can observe them, you can respond to them, and you can literally choose which ones to follow. And he literally wrote essays that you have the power over your mind, not outside events. And realize this, and you'll find strength. So if a man who owned nothing, not even his own freedom, could learn to see the difference between himself and his thoughts, well, the great news is so can you. Epictetus helps to see something like essential, and that is your anxiety is not you, even when you feel like it's building up inside of you. It's not authentically you. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential therapists in modern psychology, believes something super radical as well. He thought that you are not what's wrong with you. He taught that every person has this concept of a real self, a calm, steady core part of you that anxiety and stress and life experiences may be able to influence, but will never be able to destroy. And Carl Rogers saw the anxiety not as a personal flaw, but more as a signal of disconnection from your inner clarity, right? Some fog going on in there. And his message was really simple. Anxiety is something that you experience, not something that you are. See, it's the same thing we talk about with addiction. It's part of you, it's not who you are. Now, Carl Jung, another giant in psychology, offered a little bit of a different angle, but I love it nonetheless. He said he saw anxiety as a messenger of expression for something that wants your attention. And so to Jung, anxiety was never a final verdict. It was a signpost pointing to truth that you may be avoiding, pressures you're carrying, or parts of yourself that want to be acknowledged. And when you mistake that message for your identity, anxiety becomes your whole world. But when you create some space, when you say, this is something I'm feeling, this isn't who I am or what I'm about, everything begins to shift. And so here's what that shift looks like in real life. Your heart speeds up, your mind starts racing, your stomach starts tightening up. And before you're done listening to this podcast, you might have said to yourself, man, I've got some anxiety going on. And after listening to it, you can say, man, I'm really noticing that anxiety. It seems small, but the psychological distance, changes everything. One phase fuses your fear. Another creates the space to let it start to occupy, erase and replace. And in that space, in that spot that's been erased, you can now begin to let the calm grow, kind of the calming features pouring. We're going to get deeper into this. All three of these men, these thinkers, they point to the same truth, and that's using different language, like that there is part of you that you can watch your anxiety without being swallowed up by it. So let's call it your observer self, right? Your observer self is the one who notices what's happening, what's going on. It's part of you that can say, my thoughts are moving pretty quick. My chest is feeling pretty tight. Something's agitating me right now. And the moment you step into this observer role, you can briefly take the opportunity to stop being submerged by that storm, right? To be consumed by it. You are no longer drowning. You're watching the waves from the shoreline. So to help you strengthen this observer skill, let's try a real simple practice. First, label what's happening. Instead of saying, I'm anxious, say, I'm noticing some anxiety, or my body is tense, or hey, a fear is showing up. This reduces the intensity by creating a little bit of distance. Second, give your anxiety a nickname. And no need to make light of it, make it something that's not, but to make it separate from you. Call it an alarm, call it a spiral, call it the worrier, call it the protector, whatever it is, name it. When it activates, you say, oh, there's the alarm, it's going off, instead of saying, something's wrong with me. Third, take a slow breath in through your nose, hold it for 4 seconds, and then breathe it out. 1, 2, 3, right? They call that box breathing. Your exhale tells your nervous system that you're safe. Most of the time what happens, you guys, is that the anxiety is trying to throw up these warning signs, and it's trying to tell you that you're in dangerous territory. And basically that could be anything that remotely reminds you of, like post-traumatic stress or situations. More often than not, you're safe. It's just the environment feels a little strange. When you take that breath, your nervous system lets you know that, okay, all right, we're calm, we're all right. Don't need to kick in the adrenaline. We're okay. And last but not least, ask yourself just a gentle question. What is this trying to tell me? This shifts away from that fear to curiosity. We hear Coach Wendell talk about it all the time. Curiosity loosens anxiety's grip. If you learn nothing else from this podcast today, but this, you are not your anxiety. You are one who notices it in your relationships, and you can see it with your mind. That'll be a great foundation for what's coming up next. So what is coming up next? Well, we got to look at this nervous system. Your nervous system isn't broken. Now, understanding what you're feeling with some compassion attached to it. When anxiety shows up in your body, it can be super frightening. It can be super scary. Again, your heart starts to race, your chest feels tight, your breathing becomes shallow, your stomach starts to turn, your hands might shake, your muscles get tense. All these things start to happen. These sensations don't just feel uncomfortable. They feel alarming. They're sounding the alarm. And when they happen so often enough, that a terrifying question starts to form, and that is, I hear it all the time, what if something's wrong with me? See, the fear makes sense. Your body feels like it's betraying you. It reacts without permission. It doesn't wait for logic. It doesn't explain itself. But here is something super important to understand before you go any further, listeners, and that's your nervous system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it learned to do to keep you safe. Because anxiety lives in that nervous system. It's not in your character, if you will. It's not a flaw, it's not a weakness, and it's not a failure to cope. It is absolutely a mechanism to help protect you, and it responds to what's coming upon you so that you can stay safe. And once you understand how it happens and how the fear around your systems can be softened, you can start taking control of that, navigating through what the experience you're having that's causing the anxiety. Your nervous system has one primary job, and that is to keep you alive. It consistently scans your environment inside and out for signs of danger. When it senses a threat, it activates that fight or flight, fawn or freeze response. This response increases your heart rate, tightens your muscles, sharpens your focus. It gets the blood, to the places that you can react quickly by. It is an ancient and automatic response, and it's incredibly effective when dealing with danger in real time. Well, the problem is your nervous system reacts to everything. The problem, I think, is that sometimes it reacts when danger is imagined or remembered or anticipated. Your body can't tell the difference between a real threat or a perceived threat. A thought of memory of a what if can activate the same alarm system as an actual emergency. And when that happens repetitively, your nervous system learns to stay on and at high alert at all times. And this is why anxiety feels physical. Your body isn't malfunctioning. It's responding to the signals it believes are important. The sensations that scare you are signs that it's activating, not that your body's damaged. They feel intense because your system is doing its job with urgency. So there's another guy that we love talking about on this podcast, and this is Marcus Aurelius. And again, a Roman back then, he understood this long before modern neuroscience. And as an emperor responsible for an entire empire, he lived under the constant pressure of uncertainty. In his private writings, he reminded himself again and again that sensations and impressions are not commands, they are signals. And he wrote that distress comes not from the event itself, but from judging and judgments that we attach to it. When your nervous system activates, the sensations are neutral. It is the meaning that you assign to it that can create that feeling of being in danger. And I can handle this. Something is wrong with what, the situation I'm in, and that can turn into panic. But modern science now confirms what Marcus, sensed intuitively, and that is when you interpret bodily sensations as threats, your nervous system escalates it. When you meet them with understanding and begin the process to calm yourself, that shift can become not about focusing on relaxation, but about removing that layer of fear, seeing it for what it really is. There's a neuroscientist named Stephen Porges, and he developed what is known as the polyvagal theory. And this helps explain why safety, not control, calms the nervous system. Your body relaxes when it perceives safety, connections, and predictability, and it stays activated when it senses danger, isolation, or uncertainty. And so anxiety often persists, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something you've not yet received enough signals for that can make it safe. Does that make sense? This is where compassion and some inner work starts to help a lot, because many people try to calm anxiety by being frightened of it and try to avoid it. They criticize themselves for feeling that way. They demand that their body stop reacting that way. They try to do it by force and control. They become so frustrated when the symptoms just don't disappear. But safety, not control, is what calms the nervous system. Your body relaxes when it perceives safety and connections and predictability, and it stays active when danger and isolation and uncertainty present itself. Anxiety often persists not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something you've not yet perceived as safe. So Carl Rogers, he observed all this pattern and all these behaviors repeatedly in therapy. He noticed that people did not change when they felt judged, even by themselves. They changed when they felt understood. You hear me talk about this all the time on Team Addict II Athlete: to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood. So Carl Rogers saw the change that they felt was powerful when they felt understood. He believed that acceptance creates conditions for growth. When you stop treating your anxiety like an enemy and start treating it like a sacred part of you, your system begins to soften. So instead of asking, how do I make this stop? Why don't you try asking yourself, what does my body need right now? Shifts the whole mindset. Often the answer is not complicated. It might be rest, it might be slower breathing, it might be gentle movement, reassurance, a pause, a moment of grounding. These are not indulgements. These are signals that you can create in your own way to create that safety. And there's a simple way to begin working with your nervous system rather than against it. When you notice anxiety rising up, simply place a hand on your chest or your abdomen. Feel the contact. Breathe slowly and deeply, exceeding the exhale slightly longer than the inhale. Then you'll quietly remind yourself, my body is trying to protect me. I am safe right now. This may feel too simple to matter, but if you repeat those signals of that they're safe and they're not dangerous, your nervous system starts to learn to stand down. Healing anxiety is not about eliminating the sensations. That's impossible. It is about changing your relationship with them. When you stop fearing your body's responses to how they might lose some of its power, over time, your system starts to recalibrate. It learns that it doesn't need to sound the alarm so often. Nothing about this process means you're broken. It means that your body is adapting to keep you safe. And I can't stress that enough, you guys. And now it needs a new a set of information. Compassion is one of I think the forerunners to help understand how to thwart this. Understanding is that information, and safety is what that information provides. So it's a process: compassion, understanding, the pursuit of that safety. So as we go a little bit further, we're going to get into some deeper concepts of this. And the thought spiral. You've had this happen when your mind just can't stop worrying, right? How great minds teach you to calm the what ifs, because anxiety starts in the body. We've discovered that, right? Sometimes it starts in the mind, more often than not. A single thought can appear small and quiet and almost harmless, but before you know it, your mind is completely racing to every possible situation or outcome. That question can turn into 10 more questions, and that worry can then feel like a full mental movie just playing out in front of you. So you try to stop it, but the harder you try, the louder it gets, right? That rumination. We've heard about rumination, right? Where you keep on having that thought spiral. Well, this is the thought spiral, that rumination. And if you live with anxiety, you know how exhausting this can be. The spiral often begins with a what if. What if something goes wrong? What if I say something wrong? What if I fail? What if this feeling never goes away? Guys, these questions, they feel urgent, as if answering them will keep you safe. But instead of providing that clarity, they just pull you deeper into that uncertainty. And that's what makes this so frustrating. It's that spiral feels protective. Your mind tells you that it's preparing to analyze, to prevent the danger, but realistically, you're just creating more of it. But most of the time, it's doing the opposite, obviously. It's feeding the fear without offering solutions. Another philosopher, Seneca, he understood this a century ago, living at the time of really high political instability and personal risk, something like we're feeling more and more these days. He noticed that much of the suffering happens before anything actually occurs. And he wrote in some of his essays that we are often more frightened than hurt, and that many of our fears, they exist only in our imaginations. And his insight wasn't meant to, dismiss the fear, but to expose the pattern. The mind has a habit of living in the future that never really truly arrives. When anxiety takes over, your mind stops responding to it, and reality starts to react into possibilities. That spiral can pull you away from what's happening, and it can trap you into what might happen. And because the future is infinite, the mind finds every infinite way to try and find relief. And that's where this awesome, therapeutic modality I use quite frequently comes into play. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy. You've heard it probably with its acronym CBT. And it explains this process in modern terms. Anxious thoughts, well, they tend to follow predictable patterns, catastrophizing, mind reading, all or nothing thinking, the overestimating danger. These patterns feel convincing because they repeat themselves, not because they are accurate, but when left unchallenged, they form loops, ruminations. They reinforce the anxiety. So the goal is not to eliminate the thoughts. You can't control which thoughts appear. The goal is to change how you respond to them. Epictetus, again, he offered a powerful distinction that applies directly to the thought spiral. And he taught that events themselves are neutral. Events themselves are neutral. It is our interpretations that disturb us. It's the story we create. A thought is not a fact. Thought is not a fact. Worry is not a prediction. A feeling is not a forecast. When you mistake thoughts for truths, that spiral starts to just get steeper and steeper. And then here's a shift that kind of helps begin to loosen all that. Instead of asking, is this thought true? Ask, is this thought helpful right now? Anxious thoughts often fail to that test. They don't lead to action. They don't lead to create clarity. They don't resolve the real problem. They simply keep your nervous system in activating progression. You see every angle for the bad. Is this thought helpful right now? So think about that for a second. You got some anxiety, right? We got travel plans coming up. Mercer and I will be flying to New York here next month for a week to do some stuff out there. And TSA lines are wickedly long right now. Crazy stuff's happening. I've been hearing plane crashes, all this stuff. Anxiety is going to tell me that, like, oh, you better get ready and go to the airport now. You're not flying out for another 3 weeks, but like, have you seen how long that TSA line is? Now, granted, what is that thought really doing for me? Is this thought true? No, I'll go a couple hours early. That should be sufficient. I'll make sure that as the date gets closer, we'll look it up. Worst case scenario, we'll arrive early and have dinner and breakfast at the airport. So again, those thoughts of risk, they don't lead to action. They don't create clarity. They don't solve real problems. So awareness about these things, it interrupts that momentum. When you notice a spiral without trying to stop it, you kind of step out of it. You move from being inside of the storm to watching it pass through, maybe in your living room, right? This doesn't make the thought like completely disappear instantly, but it removes its authority, if you will. And one practical way to do this with spirals is to name them as they happen. You might say, well, this is a worry loop. I'm stuck in a worry loop. Or my mind is future telling again. Naming it creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice weakens the spiral. I love that, right? I'll say that again. Like, distance creates choice. Choice weakens the spiral. Another approach to limit how much space anxiety gets in your mind is, if your mind wants to worry, give it a container. Put it in a container. Set it aside for a specific time later in the day that you'll allow yourself to think about it. When worries arise outside of, the window you're giving yourself, gently remind, the inner self of yours that you'll come back later to deal with this. This trains your brain to stop intruding constantly. It's also super important to bring your attention back to the present moment, the here and now. Anxiety thrives on the abstract, the presence that it tries to create, right? This worry. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you feel right now? What tasks are directly in front of you? Grounding yourself in the present doesn't dissolve every problem, but it interrupts the spiral from keeping you in that long coursework all the way down to the ground. Thought spirals doesn't mean that you're weak or broken. Thought spirals mean that your mind is trying to protect you. Again, using imagination instead of information. And once you understand that, you can respond with skill instead of fear. So I think that's kind of a powerful tool to remind yourself of. And worry isn't really preparation. Worry has a convincing story to it. It tells you that, if you think ahead enough, if you plan far enough ahead, if you replay, every scenario that could possibly happen, you'll be ready for whatever happens. It promises protection. It whispers that staying alert is the responsible thing to do. And because it feels so active, it can easily be mistaken for preparation. But worry is not preparation. It's a mental rehearsal without resolution. Preparation leads to clarity. Worry leads to exhaustion. You've probably recognized that in a few situations you've been in. Preparation results in action. Worry results in more thinking. Yet anxiety blurs the distinction so effectively that many people believe they're being proactive when they're accurately trapped in that loop. Your brain didn't come up with this idea randomly from evolutionary standpoints. Worrying made sense. Anticipating danger increase your survival, right? We've talked about this in group many times. The mind learns to scan ahead, imagine threats, and stay alert. So it's how we all climbed down to the caves as cavemen, right? That system worked really well when danger was immediate and physical, but modern life isn't like that. The threats are often abstract, emotional, or just completely uncertain. But the brain still acts as if constant vigilance is required. You've probably felt this way. This is why worry feels urgent. Your nervous system believes it's helping. It's helping you stay safe. It doesn't realize that the danger is responding to, that's responding to may never even occur. So it keeps sounding the alarm. People suffer more in anticipation than they do in reality. We are often distressed by imaginary events and futures that never arrive, yet the suffering feels real in the moment. Now, this insight points to a real important truth, and that is the mind can create pain without events even happening. Worry thrives on uncertainty. The moment something feels unresolved, the brain tries to close the gap by thinking harder. But uncertainty can't be resolved through rumination. No amount of worrying can guarantee an outcome. Instead, it creates an illusion of control while quietly draining your energy. And this is where anxiety becomes kind of deceptive. It convinces you that letting go of worry is reckless. That if you stop thinking about it, the worst case scenario, you're probably going to be unprepared when it arrives, right? If you stop thinking about it, you're not going to know how to react. But consider this. When has excessive worry actually made you more capable in the moment? When has it improved your performance, your decisions, your sense of calm? Most people discover that worry doesn't make them safer, it makes them tired. So again, in cognitive behavioral therapy, it kind of offers some helpful distinctions between productive concern and unproductive worry. Productive concerns lead to specific actions. Unproductive worry, creates these cycles, these circles of endless, like destinations without any kind of resolution. If a thought leads to a clear next step, you can now take it. Well, it may be useful. If it leads to more questions, more tension, and no action, it's likely feeding anxiety rather than preventing harm. So again, getting back to our old Roman guy, Epictetus, he taught that peace comes from focusing on what's within your control and releasing what's not. Worry ignores this boundary. It tries to control every outcome, every person, all the people, every future event, and any unknown variables that might be out there. The mind reacts beyond its influence and becomes overwhelmed by the process. So a helpful question to ask when worry appears like this is to say, hey, is there something I can do about this right now? If the answer is yes, then do that small action and let the thought rest. If the answer is no, worrying serves absolutely zero purpose in the moment, and it only keeps your nervous system fully engaged, fully activated. The present moment is the only place where life is actually happening. So worry pulls you out of that moment and into imaginary futures. When you gently return your attention to what's real and immediate, you weaken anxiety's grip. This is not avoidance, it's grounding. It's you getting centered. One practical way to do this is to separate planning from worrying. Planning is intentional, it's time limited. Worry is repetitive and open-ended. You might choose a specific time and plan or problem solving like path. Outside of that time, when worry arises, you can remind yourself that you've already set that time aside to prepare for what's coming. This reassurance to the brain without letting it start to get back into autopilot is exactly the mechanism of growth you need. Another powerful shift is to replace a question with, what if something goes wrong, with a, what if I can handle whatever happens? It doesn't deny uncertainty, but it acknowledges your resilience. Worry assumes you won't cope. Worry assumes you won't cope. So trust reminds you that you really often do cope. You really do have success. So letting go of worry is not about caring less. It's about, an act of trust in yourself, in your ability to respond, and in a reality like form of mind, and that you don't need to suffer in advance to be prepared. And I love that mindset. So we have these attributes of fear and panic and moments you think that you're just going to lose control. Panic feels different from ordinary anxiety. It comes on fast. Your heart's pounding, your breath becomes shallow and rushed, your chest again tightens, you might feel dizzy or even trapped inside your own body. Panic attacks are real and they are intense. And in those moments, fear doesn't feel abstract. It feels immediate and overwhelming. The scariest part is not just the sensation itself, that panic, right, that feeling. It is the thought that follows them. What if I lose control? What if I pass out? What if I can't escape this feeling? Panic convinces you something is terrible and something horrific is about to happen, even when you are not in danger. And because the experience is so intense, it can leave very long-lasting impressions. Now, I've worked with many people who kind of think that begin to fear the fear of panic itself, the worry about when the next episode of panic might strike. They scan their bodies consistently. They watch for signs, and without realizing it, they start living around panic rather than living life. But there's something essential to understand. Panic does not mean you're losing control. It means your nervous system has surged into a high alert state. And that surge feels extreme, but it's temporary. It always rises, peaks, and falls. Again, another amazing man, Viktor Frankl, great book, A Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl understood this fear from the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Surviving the Holocaust, he observed that fear becomes unbearable when people believe they have no inner freedom left. Panic takes hold when you feel trapped inside the experience with no way out. And Viktor Frankl's insight was not about controlling sensations, but about reclaiming your relationship to them. Even when you cannot change what's happening in your body, you can change how you're going to respond to it. Panic often escalates because of resistance. The moment you think this must stop right now, your body receives the message that danger is present. Resistance adds fuel to that fire. The more you fight that sensation, the more your nervous system stays activated. Getting back to Carl Jung, he would describe panic as a moment when the unconditioned flood of consciousness overwhelms the body. The body then reacts faster than the mind can interpret what's going on. And when this happens, panic feels alien. It feels like it's taking over. But Jung believed that fear loses power when it is kind of brought to awareness. When you recognize the panic as a state rather than a catastrophe, you can begin to ground yourself once more. One of the most powerful shifts during a panic attack is to move from escape to allowance. That does not mean liking the sensations or even wanting them. It means allowing them to be present without interpreting them as danger. Panic cannot harm you, but it can kind of push fear and panic to prolong it. So if you think about it, that those frightening inner experiences only deepen suffering. So if you encourage meeting difficult moments with gentleness, with curiosity, there's a way out of it. So a real simple grounding practice during panic is to focus on your exhale. You don't need to take deep breaths, just lengthen the exhale slightly. This sends a signal of safety to the nervous system. You can also anchor yourself in the present by naming what you see, what you hear, and what you feel physically. And those small acts remind your body that you're here right now, and that you are safe. And so I think it's also important to understand what panic is not. Panic is not a heart attack. It is not madness and is not a weakness. It is not loss of control. It is a surge of adrenaline paired with some fearful interpretations of what's happening before you. And when the interpretation changes, the experience changes. Many people fear that panic will escalate endlessly, but panic is self-limiting. It can't keep going. The nervous system cannot stay in peak activation indefinitely. It's got to come down. So when you stop adding to the fear, when you stop adding to the sensation, that wave passes a lot more quickly. So remember that. So as we kind of look deeper into it, you got to look into some of these crucial facts, and that is you are stronger than you think. You've survived a lot of these previous surges of energy and panic that you've had, and you've always been able to come out the other side. So learning to meet panic with understanding instead of terror, it transforms it into something that doesn't control your life and that you can move through. And panic definitely loses its grip, not when you eliminate it, but when you stop being afraid of it. And that shift opens up lots of doors to emotional freedom, you guys. So as we kind of wrap this up, we'll talk about learning how to regulate and not fight, right? When you pull away, when you shut down or you delay how you take your life back, we can have some problems. So avoidance is one of anxiety's greatest strategies. Dun, da, da, da. It doesn't always look dramatic, and sometimes it looks like putting things off is kind of the only option you have. Canceling plans, staying busy so that you don't have to feel, distracting yourself endlessly, choosing comfort over challenges again and again until your world slowly gets smaller. Well, that's not the goal. Avoidance often feels like relief. When you step away from what scares you, what makes you nervous, the anxiety drops, at least temporarily, and your body relaxes and your thoughts slow down. And so your brain learns something real powerful, and that is avoidance works. But that's how avoidance becomes reinforced. The problem is not that you avoid, it's that avoidance trains your nervous system to believe the world is more dangerous than it actually is. Each time you pull back, your brain concludes that, the situation was unsafe. And because your nervous system does such a great job to protect you, it encourages you to avoid even more things. So over time, it creates this painful cycle. The things you avoid don't disappear. We all know that. They wait. The longer they wait, the bigger they feel. Avoidance doesn't just apply to the situation. It applies to emotions and conversations and decisions and memories and all kinds of parts of you. Merce and I are watching a movie right now that's about this therapist who's trying to help this kid, overcome some PTSD, and he keeps on wanting him to talk about it, and the kid just keeps avoiding it, and it's making it worse. It doesn't make it better, but you can see how that avoidance of dealing with something to actually grow and change, that he's doing it to avoid conflict because he feels threatened, and that makes tons of sense. That's why we all do it. But avoid the rest of that thought because your brain gets louder and louder if you try to ignore it. So if you avoid joy because vulnerability feels risky, well, avoid starts to become kind of your go-to because the failure of it feels unbearable. None of this means you're weak. It means your anxiety is trying to keep you safe, remember? By reducing exposure to discomfort. But unfortunately, safety built on avoidance is fragile, and it depends on the constant sense of control. Again, Viktor Frankl, he totally understood this trap really well. He observed that fear often grows when people try to escape it. The more you organize your life around avoiding discomfort, the more power that discomfort gains. Avoidance may protect you in the short term, but it quickly steals freedom over time. Modern psychologists confirm this insight. Avoidance prevents your nervous system from learning something essential, that you can handle discomfort and survive it. Without that learning, fear remains unchallenged and it will never be corrected. This is why anxiety feels like it expands to bigger beasts that you can handle, right? What starts as avoidance of one situation becomes avoidance to many situations. The boundaries tighten, life feels narrow, like more narrow, and even eventually like overwhelming. The avoidance begins to feel like the problem in and of itself. This is where exposure therapy helps significantly. One of the most effective treatments for anxiety based on one simple principle: avoidance maintains fear. Gentle exposure reduces it. And this does not always mean throwing yourself into some overwhelming situation. It means approaching discomfort gradually, with support and intention, so that your nervous system can remain calm and remain in the safe zone. Again, Epictetus says he taught that freedom comes from meeting reality rather than fleeing from it. He believed that suffering increases when we resist what is already happening to us. When you avoid, you are often resisting the possibility of discomfort rather than the discomfort itself. So the goal is not to eliminate fear before you. The goal is to act where fear is present. Courage is not the absence of anxiety. It is the willingness to move forward despite it. So guys, as we kind of wrap up, this doesn't mean that, forcing yourself into situations, because force creates more resistance. What works is gentle, prepared, and consistent acts of small steps and courage. Repeated experiences, proof over time that discomfort is tolerable and temporary. You might start by noticing where avoidance shows up in your life most often, and then ask yourself, well, why am I delaying this? What do you do to distract yourself from it? What do you tell yourself you'll learn or do later? These patterns are not failures. They're maps. They show you where your nervous system feels least safe. So from there, you can begin to choose appropriate methods of approach instead of avoiding, these things in small ways. Sending the message to yourself that you've been putting things off by staying in the conversations a few minutes longer each time, sitting with your feelings without numbing them, without, trying to avoid them. That creates the tolerance that you need to build, that push. Each step teaches your nervous system, this is something I can handle and I don't need to hide from it anymore. Freedom grows each time you choose patience over escape. And little by little, your world begins to open up again. So I think that might be enough for you for one day. Holy cow, that was quite the soapbox. I hope this help you understand where anxiety comes from, why it bubbles up, why it can feel so overwhelming. And if you like this, let me know. We can get into some more attributes to it. I'd love to tell you a little bit about how, control can become a prison with this kind of stuff and so on and so forth. So if you like this podcast, jump on and give us a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you want more help, if you got some therapeutic concerns, maybe you need to have a one-on-one with Coach Blue, you can do so through that school app or the website addicttoathlete.org. But listeners, you've been well fed today. I hope this helps and not creates more anxiety, but helps maybe create a path for you to overcome some of that adversity. You're not alone. You got a team behind you. Jump on the socials, listen to the podcasts, share them with the people that need them. And the goal, I think, for all of us is to turn all of our ugly, bad messes into very powerful messages.